That was fine, Cat. Is this a better time for you, Cat, if I start at this time? And just doing an auto check. Audio check and 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me now, Cat? Very good. Welcome, Cat. Is this a better time for you if I stream at this time? I might do it again in future like now. Welcome, Nemo. We're going to wait for Katla and then we'll start. Thank you, Nemo. I know, Cat. Okay, guys, we waited a little bit. It's time to begin. Hopefully, Cat will show up. Cat will show up, but I can't wait forever. So, we shall move in, first of all, to a map. So here is Cumbria in northern England. So we are in northern England, as you can see. And this part is called, this little peninsula here is called Cumbria. And Penrith is this little node in here where all the roads meet. And then you go inland and you get to uh, Keswick. This is the village of Keswick here. Very picturesque town, Keswick. Um, and a lot of this area, as you can see, is the Lake District National Park. Is this, oops, it's this entire area in here. And it's the first the oldest and the largest national park in the UK. And today we're going to go up to Ullswater and Pooley Bridge. And Pooley Bridge is a town. Go down to here, and there's a lake in the Lake District called Ullswater, probably named for a Norseman, by probably the name of I think it's what is it Olaf or something. We can look him up again. Ullswater. Yes. Toponymy. Olaf's Lake. Olaf. Okay. Wolf's. Wolf. um, who might have moved into this area at the time. Nobody quite knows. But right, and there's a bunch of other lakes in this area, such as Thirlmere. I know there's Derwentwater. So Derwentwater is a very well-known one. And then you have Bassenwaith. There's also Lake Buttermere, and so on. We'll get to those later. But today, this is going to be a relatively short stream. We're going to go to Ullswater, and then we're going to go to a place called Force, which is a waterfall. And then there's a trail that allows you to hike back towards Pooley Bridge. And that's what we'll be doing today. On our first full day in Penrith. Yes, there's a lot of those type of names in this part of the country. It all sounds very Scottish or Norse in this part of the country. I think it was part of the Danelaw, which is the part of England taken over by the Danes or Norse or whatever you want to call them, the Vikings, just before the Norman conquest. That's an interesting choice, Nemo. Um, and this part is, I say, very, very picturesque part of the country. So I think I got a taxi up to this area. Or was it no, maybe it was the bus. I'm blanking on it. It's not that far, but and this is the beginning of Ullswater. And you go into town. It looks like a almost like a Swiss or maybe even like a Austrian like alpine town. This narrow little valley and this huge mountains on either side of you, and there's little snaking lake in between. And we're gonna take a ferry boat up the river. Um, so here's our ride. Make sure everybody can see this properly. Oh, did we switch over yet? I probably didn't switch over properly. Let me check. Uh, there we go. Yes, Nemo. That's Ullswater. Here's the ferry. They have a couple ferries on the lake, tour ferries. Most of them are like 100 years old or so. And this is the Lady Waterfield. Okay. And we're gonna get on. It was very crowded, especially in the summer. We have a lot of tourism up here. And this is approximately what it looks like, going all the way up and down. Now that mountain in the distance, let's see if we can identify it. That might be Thackwith. I'm trying to, or is that Dockwray? I'm not entirely sure. Um, well, it's one of the more well-known mountains, oops, in the area. And this was an unusually clear day. Usually, of course, it's totally packed in and cloudy and gray. But my week I was in there was very sunny. Like I was told, it was like the sunniest week all year. I think I was told that to avoid disturbing the ferries, if you have a private boat on the lake, there's a speed limit of like 5 knots, so you can't go very fast. And there's been a lot of controversy about whether or not to allow like jet skis on the lake. People want to bring jet skis, but it produces a heavy wake and it can disturb the ferries. And they've allowed them, and then they've prohibited them, and they go back and forth, and all this kind of stuff. This is a very typical landscape of the area. Welcome, Kala, to Ullswater and Pooley Bridge. Here's an example of one of the problems if you try to zoom in too much with an iPhone. You get this kind of like impressionistic view of uh, things after a while. It's not really very clear. This is why I want a proper camera sometimes. Indeed, Kala. That's interesting, Calla. It does have a Northern California feel to it. Now we are coming up to the village of Glenridding, sorry to say, Glenridding, on the opposite side of the lake. Uh, Only seasonally inhabited, I think. Oh, I'm sure, Nemo. I'm sure. And then we're going to turn around. That is the ferry going in the opposite direction. So basically, we went the whole length of the lake, and then we're going to come back to Air Force. And probably no real village there, just, but there is a stop. How Town. Okay, that's maybe the stop we're looking for. There's our captain letting us off. All right, this must be our stop for the waterfall. One of the 3 days out of the year, Calla. We're actually very far north here. We're like above almost all of the inhabited parts of Canada. I have to look at the exact latitude, but we're pretty close to like 60 degrees north at this point. Um, I mean, I can actually look that up, but all right, 54. I mean, not quite 60, but yeah, we're a lot closer than you think. Yeah, we're pretty much north of all inhabited Canada. Uh, Yeah, maybe we're turning around. Okay, I forget exactly where we are. Things. We're gonna get there. This is 4 years ago, so I'm a little rusty in my memory. And there's this tower on top of a hill somewhere, which I find interesting. Exactly, Callum. In that previous um, version of my itinerary for this trip, I did actually visit um, what is it? Inverness. I had a plan for like a lake cruise of Loch Ness. But that got scrubbed eventually. I turned it something else, turned it something else, turned it something else, eventually turned it this. But um, okay, we finally made landfall, and it's time for a hike. Let's look at the sign here. Ullswater Way, Glenring. Okay. Leaving the lake behind, we head out to Air Force. Or apparently not. Maybe the next stop. Okay. Okay, maybe this is it. Taking all the stops. I remember this path. So you proceed past this wall and up to the mountain. And this is the main road which goes on the north side of the lake, which we will come back to. Air Force. Now, force is the local name for a waterfall. It comes from a Norse word. Most of the rivers in the area are called becks, also a Norse word. Now, I found this name particularly interesting because there's a Royal Air Force base nearby, and they often fly down the valleys in this area at low altitude. They'll buzz you. So I found it interesting that you'll often get flybys from the Air Force near Air Force waterfall. Thank you, Nemo. Yes, it really is. It's very vivid, like three-dimensionally very vivid. Yeah, it's hard to describe, but it's like it feels big and huge and in your face. It's very, I call it like a three-dimensional landscape, not just like a plane or something. It really is in all directions of you. It's something it's hard to describe, but you got to be there. And there's Error Force. It's actually fairly hard to see from the trail. You have to really position yourself in the right way. You can hear it from a long way away, but actually seeing it is a challenge. Now, this reminds me of a local waterfall called Ket Falls, which is also a tourist attraction. And there's all sorts of paths and different staircases and all this stuff in the area. Um, that one on top looks like it's out of commission, but they go all around the waterfall. Obviously, I can only go one route today and have time for anything else. But so I was able to do all of them. But there's a lot in the area. I was told by my principal cab driver, I think his name's Paul, that a couple of years back, like 2017, there was a major storm that went through the area and it washed out a lot of the roads, a lot of the trails, and it really damaged a lot of areas. There's some remote farmhouses and stuff that were cut off for weeks before they could rebuild the roads and stuff like this. Um, and some of the trails in this area were still damaged from back then. And now we go above the waterfall and up into the mountains. Yes, we will see more of that later, Kella, as we take a very, very narrow road, probably maybe the next day, or we'll see. Yeah, there's some adventures up ahead. Uh, it's a very mountainous area. And despite the fact that we're at a fairly high trail, there's still quite a bit of mountain above us. So we came from that direction, and the peak you just saw is off to the right, and you can see the lake on the left. And that's what the trail looks like. And you can see kind of a castle-like house below us. And I asked somebody about that. They said it's just somebody's private house, basically. They don't know exactly who it is, but there are some rich people who have very large houses in this area. So yes, the ferns make this area feel very, very ancient. Because as you probably all know, ferns were some of, if not the, earliest plants to colonize the land. So whenever I encounter ferns, you encounter that feeling of very ancientness. Lake Ullswater. I looked out for Calla. That's nice, Calla. I did name it Argala. Mostly just an iPhone 11, Um, I did have the Panasonic LX10, but that was pretty rare. It has a startup process, which is just by the time you take a picture, it's too late kind of thing. It doesn't work, and people kind of respond to a camera sometimes negatively, so you don't really want to do it too much. Um, and then you have to kind of strap it on, and you have to change the batteries all the time. And it's just I always carried it, but it was rare to use it. It does help to use the features on the iPhone to the max to have a good idea of exposure and what to focus on and so on. And so long as you don't zoom too much, it's not that bad. And, um, you don't get any proper optical zoom, a very small sensor. Like, so in more extreme scenarios, not so great. But something like this actually can be pretty good. Yeah, you can see my shadow here is pretty long since it's already past 4 o'clock in the afternoon at this point. I haven't even gotten that far in trail, so obviously the sun is going to set 6:30, 7 o'clock, probably like 7 o'clock. So we have less than 3 hours of daylight left. At this point, I believe we're on this trail at an average of about 1,000 feet above the lake in altitude. We're a little bit higher than a local park I frequently go to, which has cliffs overlooking the surrounding area that are about 800 feet tall. So it reminded me of that a little bit. Well, it is pretty old. um, my current one is an iPhone 15 I have right now. And the 11 is my backup phone. I did on this trip pretty much, I wouldn't say destroy the battery with a lot of fast charging, but it is less than it used to be. Let's put it that way. Yeah, it's probably not as last like Nema. I buy all my electronics basically off of eBay or Amazon. I always buy used stuff like 2 generations behind. It's a lot cheaper that way. Yes, phone toast is not a good idea anymore. The path ahead. Steep on the left, and you just fall right down to lake 1,000 feet on the right. Yawn. Okay. And then the trail becomes this. I have no idea. We have to come up. A trail behind. And then we came through this area with all these lichened trees, which I find interesting. Felt very ancient. All the trees for a quarter mile or so were just completely covered in this sort of lichen or moss or something. Interesting. All the ground, everything. Like green snow. Like this. Covered everything. All of a sudden. Tethera. Yawn and Tethera. And then I found this slug on the trailway. It was very interesting. It's quite large, probably about, it must have been 3 or 4 inches long, as wide as your thumb. um, he was just slugging along, doing his little thing. Very cute little guy. And those eyes were moving around all the time on the stalks there. He was looking this way. He was looking that way. I knew he was just creeping forward, trying to live a slug's life. Don't know what he's doing as slug this far up the mountain, but shouldn't he be bit down the water? There you are, little guy. Yes, he was. I don't know why that name. Calla. That is not very appetizing. Hello. I tried to get down to his level. He was curious about me for a minute there, and then he moved on. It took him literally like 5 minutes to go from one side of the trail to the other. I was trying to protect him in case somebody else came along and see him accidentally stepped on him or something. But I stayed with him for like the 4 or 5 minutes it took him to cross the 5 foot wide tail. There you are, little guy. You gotta get to the other side. And you can actually see their eyes moving when they do that. You can see within, there's actually like a little eye socket in those things. And then the stalk itself moves. It's fascinating to watch them. They're seeing everything. They're worried about everything. They're kind of little scary cats. Um, Don't gotta be scared of me, Mr. Slug. I'm trying to protect you. But yeah, you can. Alright, moving on. Meanwhile, on the trail, and then we came to a more low-lying area around here. It was flatter. Now I was trying to walk all the way back to Pooley Bridge. Unfortunately, I was getting late, and I had to catch a certain bus, and I had to do this, I had to do that. You know, it was like 6:40 already. Um, and there was a certain mass. I had eventually cut it short, like a third of the way left. But thank you, Nemo. Oh, that's interesting, Kala. And it kind of transitions more into countryside, this farm field and stuff. Just at this point. We finally meet some sheep. And then we kind of walk down to the road to catch the bus back into town. Now, a lot of the farmhouses in this area are built of this stone with very small windows, as you can see here, because this is the border regions between Scotland and England. And back in the day, we would have raiding parties that went across the border from one side to the other. And so if you lived in this area, you had to have a fortified barn in this case, Scottish raiders came across the border. And so they had very small, very defensible, like slit windows in case they had to basically convert your farmhouse into a fortress. Um, until you'll see a lot of architecture like that around here. And Paul, I think Paul is my main taxi driver slash tour guide in the area. All right, so that is all for today, folks. This is a short one. If anybody has any questions, yes, it is indeed Nima, my shadow. Indeed, Nima. Of course, I went the other way too. So the whole trip, Nemo. So currently, this is I think the 13th. Yeah, September 13th, and we're gonna go to the 27th. So we have 2 more weeks. Assuming you do two, well, some cases you might be able to do 2 days in one of these trip reports, but some of the later days are gonna have a lot of pictures, especially once we get into Cambridge. So it might be like 14 more weeks of this stuff. Um, yes, lots more, Calla. So next week, actually, I can look ahead a little. So next week we have like a lot of pictures, but this is gonna be, let's see. Oh, yes, Long Meg. More sewing circles tomorrow. Uh, well, yeah. So for this, we went west from Penrith, and then tomorrow or next week are gonna go east inland. All right, guys. So if you have any more questions, otherwise we'll wrap it up.